I am Maria Fiola Magro from Business Development Institute. BDI, established in 2001, is a B2B event agency that specializes in producing invitation-only, thought leadership-driven customer acquisition events and webinars that attract our clients' buyers while providing valuable content and networking opportunities to their prospects. I would like to thank our speaker, Stephen Louie, Creative Director of FlightPath. I would also like to thank our sponsor, FlightPath. We have a very simple agenda, and the webinar will run for about 45 minutes. The first portion of the webinar will consist of a presentation, and the last 10 to 15 minutes will be a moderated question and answer session from the audience. We strongly encourage your questions, so please submit them through the GoToWebinar platform. The webinar is being recorded, and you may access the recording and presentation after the event. You will be notified of their availability via email after the webinar. For those of you on Twitter, please use hashtag BDI1 so we may all follow the conversation. With that, I would like to introduce our speaker. Stephen, you may begin.
Thank you, Maria. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me in this presentation of remarkable trends across digital design. Today we'll talk about trends as it relates to many facets of digital design. I'm hoping the insights I present today will be informing and useful to everyone's own execution of design across numerous digital platforms. My name is Stephen Louie. I am a digital designer. I'm a partner and creative director of FlightPath. FlightPath is a marketing and creative agency. Since 1994, FlightPath has been helping organizations to create and connect or use digital channels to maximize potential and opportunities. The presentation will be divided in 3 sections. First, interface and layout, where we'll talk about trends as it relates to overall structure of digital design. Next, visual, which I will cover trends as it relates to creative of a more visual nature. And last, moving forward, where I'll speak to other digital design trends to keep top in mind as all of us move forward. I will start with this quote from Steve Jobs. Design is not what it looks like and what it feels like. Design is how it works. Design is more than just the facade of how things look and feel, but rather is how you interact with design, or in our case, digital design. And how the design itself gives back is what's important. In that, quote, how it works. Let's start with interface and layout. The first trend I'd like to talk about is long scrolling pages. In a nutshell, scrolling is often trumping clicking. With the ubiquitous use of mobile devices, users have been very accustomed to scrolling more than they've ever before. In this example on the screen, I'm showing you a page from Apple.com, specifically the Apple Pay wireless payment service they offer, and how the content, if you look at the screen, this is a capture of the totality of the screen where different portions are kind of captured and placed left to right. Users are finding it easier to scroll through a page to get information than clicking or tapping. Here, I'm showing a website called Simply Gum, a website where they tout to sell 100% natural gum. It's what we call a single-page website. Everything is in one page, whereby the top navigation actually acts as links down to different portions of the page. We call them anchor links in our nomenclature, but the idea being all the information is here for someone to peruse simply by scrolling down the page or if they choose, they can use the navigation to jump to that particular section, offering the user to choose how he or she wants to peruse the content. Long scrolling pages have expanded beyond just the home page and can be found on content and product pages. Here I present a web page for the Tesla electric car, the Model S model, and note how it's it's copious, it's deep, but presented nicely, and pretty much everything that the manufacturer wants to sell you on the car is here on one page. Here's another page, a little lighter, maybe not nearly as deep, but still full of information. It is a product page for one of Google's tablets, the Nexus 9. And one thing to kind of note is, while at overall glance, the page may seem to have a lot going on, whether it be this page or the previous Tesla page, bear in mind a user's experience will actually lead them to view this content more in chunks if you consider that everything will be framed by the actual screen size, let's say a laptop. So in this instance, I've made a screen capture of actually someone looking at this page. Here we have a video of a scroll down on this page, and as you can see, as you scroll down, you're actually seeing things in a actually far more digestible manner than may appeared on the previous screen. Moreover, there's additions of animations and other kind of like scroll motion, animations that appear upon scroll, that can actually make the scrolling appearance more engaging. To recap, scrolling is trumping clicking in many instances, and users are finding it easier to scroll through a page to get information than to click and tap. Next, let's go the other way around and talk about digital design that fills the screen where you're not scrolling. Full screen design is a type of responsive design where the design adapts in such a way that it completely fills the screen with no scroll bars at all. Here is an example of such a site. It's a Lexus International magazine website. Such designs allow the content to be tight and focused. Here I present another example of such a site selling the Ghost blogging platform. Animations and background video can be also added to enhance these full screen designs. The aspect of animation and background video will be something I will speak to often throughout this presentation. Here we're looking at a Santa tracker website whereby I actually used to make sure my child got to bed Christmas Eve by making sure she knew that Santa was on his way. Again, to recap, among other attributes to remember in full screen design, one thing to keep in mind, it allows clarity and focus. Next, I'd like to talk about modular and grid-based layout. Divide it up. Grid and modular design is not new to design, let alone digital design. A dependence on grids in responsive design has brought this type of design to the forefront. Here, I show a heavily gridded layout for the website for Wired Magazine UK. I had touched upon scrolling previously. This site is also novel in its approach in that this page actually scrolls left to right, or scrolls horizontally. So it's a combination of the previous trend I talked about. Content in grid-based design is actually intended to fully fill into each of these gridded modules, as shown here in this stories.com e-commerce site. These grid modules in turn flexibly scale or stack depending on screen size. Here I show a website for Coca-Cola specifically for their My Coke Rewards loyalty program. The layout on the left is a desktop view. The layout on the right side here is a mobile view. And as you can see at the actual grid modules themselves, you can see how these grid modules restack themselves to fit different screen sizes. To recap, grid design is not new, but today it fits very well into modern digital design fluid layouts. Ooh, I like this one. Everyone likes a comeback. Vertical navigation, the return. Vertical navigation was quite prevalent during the early days of the web. Note the apple.com website circa 1997. Beautiful design. With the rise of responsive design, we're starting to see mobile design elements such as flyout, right or left menus be implemented on all screen sizes. On the right side here, you'll see Disney.com with its flyover vertical menu. Users are being conditioned in using the hamburger icon. That's the icon that you see here with 3 horizontal lines stacked one on top of each other, hence the hamburger. And they are accustomed to using this to access main navigation. Evident in this MSG Varsity app, an app to track and display content from local high school sports in the tri-state area, something designed and developed by my agency for that matter. It's used as its main form of navigation. Tapping on it opens up the navigation that you see anchored by the logo at the top. The vertical menu is also evident in a lot of just desktop websites. In this case, here's a getting started website for Optimum. It's a site that introduces Optimum cable services for new customers, also developed by FlightPath. And you see on the left, very clean design with actually topics that they can click through. If they need a deeper dive, they simply tap on the menu button and the menu on the right side flies out to show additional options. Such navigation is also surfacing in new sites where there is a need for deeper sections and deeper categories. In this case, I'm showing the navigation for Time magazine. Note the long list of categories that exist and is needed for this type of website. Here's a novel implementation, vertical navigation of vertical instruments for this feelingthestreet.com website sponsored by Toyota. The navigation itself is quite concise off to the side, but there's also the hamburger icon that can expand and reveal even further deeper functions. Hiding or minimizing the main navigation by way of the vertical icons allows the site design to be as clean and as focused as you particularly want. To recap, users by way of mobile know how to access the navigation, and by and large, it's just as accessible. It's only one click or tap away, and vertical navigation in some instances can actually be more scannable than this multi-row horizontal navigation that you see on many websites today. The next trend I'm going to talk about is what I describe as micro interactions. Taking some liberties here on my part, for this presentation's purposes, I'm describing any module or experience focused on one user need or task as a micro interaction. Micro interactions often surface only as needed. As applied to digital design, examples include a survey or a scale, first-time visit tutorial help, recommendation or product recommendation box. Other examples that you've probably often seen: email sign-up boxes, location-based reminder interface, and subscription and other upsell boxes. To recap, the key to micro-interaction is focus on one user need or task. When surfaced, and I'll emphasize surfaced judiciously, and in appropriate moments, micro-interactions actually can significantly make a user experience more functional and enjoyable. You're trying to actually keep the user from having to deal with too much at once. Judicious and appropriate are key here. And with that, let's dive into and talk more about visual design trends. Let's start with this. Type, images, and video. Go big, go dynamic. As the title implies, I'm throwing a lot into this one trend. Large photo image backgrounds done powerfully and elegantly work quite well. Here is the homepage for apple.com with a clear and very, very elegant and bold approach to launching and promoting the Apple Watch. Big, bold type as a way to deliver a brand message. This is a site dear to my heart, our very own agency, flightbath.com website. Here's another example of bold and stylized typography for this exposure photo-related website. I alluded to this attribute before, but here we have full screen video backgrounds that autoplay. Let me play this for you. Here, a skincare practices website, this large lead bold video actually tells the story of being a client for this office. In some ways, allowing the user to experience it just by sitting back and watching this big video. Last here's a home page that seems to put together a lot of big and dynamic and even some of the other trends mentioned before all in one place. The website is Charity Order. Some of you may be familiar with this. And rather me just telling you in terms of the content on this website and how it works, let me show you. Note the lead video, the storytelling that occurs at the top. User can choose to sit and watch this, or if they choose, they can also scroll down the page. Inline animation through scrolling adds wow and engagement to the page itself. Scroll down with other bite-sized informations by way of cards, which I'll speak to later, and more bold call-outs and infographics and imagery anchored with call to actions and stories to tell. Type, images, and video go big, go dynamic. When done right, it can add wow and engagement. Next, extend beyond stock photography. Let's face it, stock imagery has gotten quite ubiquitous. Cliches are everywhere. Poorly chosen stock photography can invoke unwanted fakeness. Use of custom imagery will ensure that no one else will have the same photos and illustrations on their site. Professionally shot photography can have a realness that can't be duplicated. Going from the left, where you actually have a very heartfelt shot for this nonprofit, to the right, which is an actual shot of an agency's office, moving down to another shot of an agency wall, eclectic as it may be, and moving to the lower right, an actual shot of music performance for this kids' music nonprofit. Whether you use custom photography or even stock, stylizing or working with stylized photography, illustration, or typography can be a trick to differentiate. Here, going from the top left, here we have a classic photo, baseball photo for this team, but it's enhanced by overlaying nice stylized typography on top of it. Next is an illustration of a tiger, but not any ordinary illustration, heavily stylized and differentiated. In the lower left, the same goes for this stack of apartment houses. And moving to the lower right, you'll notice this quadrant of images. Taken in themselves, these stock images themselves were quite unordinary. But what was done to these images, they were actually a color cast and stylized, to make them unique, while at the same time make them feel like they're a set and belong together when displayed together on a website. Lastly, if you really do have to use canned stock images, choose something that keeps it real, keeps it natural, and avoid the typical and literal. So whether it be an image in the top left that indicates Valentine's Day, or a picture in the top right where it's not your typical beach shot, but a shot of you lying down looking up in the sky under a beach umbrella to perhaps talk about vacation, or Easter, or kids, the choice of keeping it natural and real and typical, avoiding a typical and literal, can go a long way to differentiating the imagery on your site. To recap, custom photo and art is generally best, but regardless, keep it distinct, keep it real, avoid literal. Next trend, depth, weight, and layers. The rise of minimalism and flat design over skeuomorphism has made adding depth, weight, and layer more important in digital design. You see this everywhere right now, whether it be any iPhone or Android phone, where you have all these flat elements. The goal with depth and weight and layers is to make these otherwise flat elements, like a card or menu, actually feel like a physical object. Looking at these iOS screens for an iPhone, you'll note things such as subtle translucency to help determine the place for a piece of content and layer in the interface. Fake depth of field or blurriness to endow focus to the buttons and message above. Momentum scrolling to help situate one's place on the page. in Google's latest mobile OS release, they've implemented what they call material design. More than looking interesting and cool, these otherwise flat objects actually have physical rules and physical presences to design to actually help improve the user interactive experience. To recap, flat design is not really flat. Depth, weight, and layers permeate through the interface elements in this modern design movement. Next trend, playfulness and personality. Computer software has always dabbled in playfulness, whether it be Easter eggs, the original Mac icon, AOL's You Got Mail announcements, or even the hated Microsoft Clippy. With digital experiences being a critical part of our everyday lives, it's more important than ever to make sure these experiences are enjoyable to use. Not too long ago, here are some examples. On the left, the Oreo Daily Twist social media campaign. On the right, Twitter's Fail Whale, which was a fun way to indicate when the service was down. Funny, that is, until it happened too often in the early days of Twitter. Brighter colors, humorous copy, little bits of the unexpected. So long as these elements don't get in the way, they make digital platforms more delight to use. Here on screen is an example from MailChimp. Freddie von Chimpenheimer IV is the face of MailChimp and the embodiment of the brand's personality. He's a cartoon character, but Freddie is still cool. Even though Freddie is a chimp or an ape, he makes the brand more human than any human spokesperson could. MailChimp is also an example of how playfulness works even in a business-to-business space. If you look on the right side, the website has undergone what's called a more cleaner design, but it still breathes with personality. Even on a price plan page, it's indicated, the price plans are indicated by these cute family figurines. Examples of personality permeate in a multitude of other platforms as well. Take mobile apps, for instance. Starting from the left, Siri, when asked, "What Apple Watch should I get now?" one of the answers I actually got, "Whatever you pick, I'm sure you will rock it." In the middle, there's a screen for Peek, a calendar app for iOS. Similar to another, design-wise, to another app called Clear that was released a few years back, it takes design cues that are actually playful and fun. In this case, a calendar event or calendar day reveals itself by pinching and opening things up. On the far right is a screenshot of Apple Maps in its flyover view. Let's be frank, the flyover view is probably less useful than Apple would like to sell us on, but it's lots of fun and lots of fun to use. To recap, we can all use a little more playfulness and personality to get through our day. Why can't our digital designs help with that too? The last section is moving forward. Extending email design. Email is one of the oldest but still most ubiquitously used digital communication platform. Majority of emails opens are happening on mobile now. responsive adaptive emails are being deployed so that they display nicely both on desktop and on mobile. Here I show an example of an email for a skincare brand, Aven, also a client and work of FlightPath. What we call CSS in-code animations, other effects and features are making their way into platforms that support them, especially mobile. So in this instance, special effects that a mobile phone can support, such as scrolling CSS animations, can be leveraged. As you see on the left, the lead not simply staying put but scrolling. The middle screen represents a feature such as an on-the-fly countdown clock that basically countdowns a sale in real time. And in the far right, for those platforms to support it, the actual playing of video inside the email. An old friend from the early days of the website is in the throes of a comeback. The animated GIF has returned into vengeance. On the left, here's an image or a GIF that was embedded in the email that shows the interaction with an app. On the right, I've pulled actual stills of a fashion model from an email as well. To recap, email is critical and as relevant as ever. It is more mobile than anything else now. It's not going away and deserves our digital design attention. Next, design things shareable. Content that gets someone's attention is great, but getting someone to pass along that content is even better. Design attributes to consider to increase shareability include: does the content make the person sharing it look smarter? Does it remind us of something, evokes familiarity? Does the content elicit emotion? Is it distinguishable? Is it memorable? Does it give utility? Does it tell a story? The more a piece of content or design has the attributes, the more likely someone will actually want to share it. Here are some examples of digital content that meet some of these attributes. On YouTube, on the left, you have emotion, an emotional, the Budweiser puppy love commercial. On the right, humor, the unskippable ads that Geico release exclusively for online purposes. In this case, it's actually a 5-second ad that stops and freezes at the 5-second point, and it's making fun of the 5-second ad that shows up on YouTube all the time. In other words, you can't skip it because the video and commercial is already over. Twitter, timely content. The example on the left was a post from Oreo moments after the lights went out on the Super Bowl. On the right, incentives, a contest sponsored by McDonald's. Instagram, picture tells 1,000 words, putting up visually compelling content. The left, Nat Geo, beautiful photograph. Shibani, beautiful food, very visually compelling. Here, appetite peel. The appetite peel of food on Goya Foods' Pinterest board, a board which my agency actually nurtures, shows great food porn, appetite appeal, very compelling. The client has worked and invested a lot to create this shareable content. Things range from lots of professional photo shoots down to even creating their own in-office studio kitchen. The next topic, privacy and security. At the dawn of e-commerce, digital designers took pains to message to users that the use of their credit cards was safe and secure. Some of us may remember the early days in the mid-90s when e-commerce was beginning, and all of us was wondering whether or not it was safe to enter our credit card numbers. I remember putting lots of badges and security banners and images that looked like locks to help, message that. Fast forward to this post-Snowden world where hacker breaches seem to be happening on a daily basis. To need to design with privacy and security in mind is paramount once again. Example considerations include disclose in plain speak what information is being collected and why. The user benefits. Facebook has needed to create a whole microsite on privacy and how they use your data. Other privacy and security features to consider in your design. Two-factor authentication, whereby you ensure if a new device or a change happens that it needs to be verified on another device that the service knows you've actually owned. Let's say you're logging in from a new laptop. They may actually make sure that you confirm that it's you by sending a text message or email to your phone. On the right is Apple's Touch ID, using biometrics to form a more secure form identification. To recap, not to be a Debbie Downer, but privacy and security will continue to be an issue. Designing with privacy and security in mind would be critical for all digital design. The last trend for the afternoon, glances and cards. Users are increasingly inundated with a fire hose of information and increasingly want to, heck, need to see relevant information at a glance. This information stored in cards or glances contains short text, images, and interaction buttons to convert transaction or to dive deeper for info. Here we show the holiday gift guide for The Verge magazine. Everything critical you need to know in a glance is right here. Grid-based layouts, mobile phones, Nest thermostats, Google Now cards, their personal assistant, is how we will get information. Going left to right, whether it be a real estate ad, eBay notification, traffic alert, or weather. To be unleashed to the world very soon, the Apple Watch with its glances. Again, similarly serving all sorts of bite-sized information. To recap, we live in a digital world where we're fire hosed with data every day, every minute. The only way we're going to only be able to deal with this is in smaller bites. Cards and glances can help that. And well, with that, I wrap up this presentation. The title of this presentation is Remarkable Trends Across Digital Design. But the way I look at it is not so much as the trends being remarkable. I'm just hoping that you can take some of these trends and create something remarkable with them. I leave you with a quote from Aristotle. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Hopefully, I've presented some of those parts in this presentation. My name is Stephen Louie, and I thank you for listening.
Stephen. We are now going to welcome questions from the audience. If you do have a question, please submit them through the chat function on the GoToWebinar platform. First question, you did not talk about specifically responsive web design. Is that no longer a trend?
I specifically did not call that out as an individual trend, but as you probably have noticed throughout the presentation, it permeates through everything. It's a given. The very fact that having to design for mobile at this point is not so much a trend in so much it's just the rule.
Okay. Next question. Regarding auto start videos, if users are in a lower bandwidth country, is there any way to configure it so this feature is practical?
In many instances, depending on your configuration, you could serve a different page based on where they're coming from. And in many instances, a lot of the effects that have shown background video, even some of the animation, even for audiences that have the bandwidth, are turned off for, let's say, tablet, because the device may not be fast enough to actually display that content. So there are instances where choices have to be made and different content served to different people in that instance.
Okay. Can you speak to the controversy over the hamburger icon and its use in revealing and hiding navigation?
My point of view on the hamburger icon and, let's say, a comment in these long menus is this. If navigation can be distilled and limited and not be long, then it's fine, that, especially on the desktop, to have the navigation persistent. If it's not, whether it's political, whether there is an actual need, then the hamburger menu could be a smart solution to try to give lots of navigation options at once. It shouldn't be used as an excuse not to try to tailor down your content and try to minimize navigation as much as possible. But in instances where it's just not tenable to have your site have, or your app to have, like 4 features or 4 buttons, then the menu navigation could be an appropriate choice to use in terms of the hamburger icon.
Okay, one more question before our time is up. With phones such as iPhone 6 and Samsung Galaxy getting increasingly larger, what is the effect on digital design?
In a sense, it just means it's an outgrowth of when mobile started coming and people were designing for different screens, and it was just emphasizing the fact that there's no one size. In that sense, in the sense of for iPhone 6 and those bigger screens or a Samsung Galaxy, it means doing things like putting the hamburger menu on the right side and not the left side, so it's easier to access through the thumb. So there are little nuances that occur because of this. Because typically the menu is often in this kind of like left-hand side, Western-dominated design on the left, but increasingly we're moving it to the right, so it's easy to access from the thumb on these larger screens. So that's an example.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. We are out of time, but we have a few more questions. So Stephen and the Flight Path team will answer any additional questions offline. We do thank everyone for attending the webinar. You will receive an email within the next day or so providing the webinar recording and the presentation. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.